Hey guys, welcome to your first chapter in college algebra. We start with chapter R for review. And we're actually going to start on section R.3, which is all about polynomials, and it covers everything that you see on the screen. So what I need you to do is I need you to take notes. I need you to watch the video, take notes as you go. You can pause the video, write down all the examples, and then you also need to write down any questions that you have or highlight or circle the ones in your notes that you want to go over in class when I actually see you. We're going to start off with some properties of exponents. You've seen this before in previous classes, but it's just something people always forget. So pause the video, write down the properties, and I'll do some examples of each one. All right, the first one is the product rule. So you see right here, you're multiplying two things with the same base, and you're actually going to add their exponents. Okay, let's say you had something like x squared times x to the fifth. Notice the bases are the same. They're both x's. If the bases were different, you couldn't use this rule, but the bases are the same. So if you're multiplying x squared times x to the fifth, you just add your exponents. So your answer would be x to the seventh. Even if you had something that looked a little more complicated, the rules are the same. You're still multiplying two quantities together. Don't forget these coefficients out front. So you'd actually multiply the 2 times the 3, so that's 6. And then when you multiply x times x squared, that's kind of like this previous example up here. You just add the exponents, so that'd be x cubed, because the exponent on this x right here is a 1, so 1 plus 2 is 3. And then when I go to do the y's, that will be y to the fourth. So your final answer is 6x cubed y to the fourth. Next up, we have the power rule. So you can see right here, you're taking a power to a power. You're raising a power to a power. It looks different than the product rule. Up here in the product rule, all of these exponents were inside the parentheses. But for the power rule, you have exponents inside the parentheses and outside the parentheses. When that happens, you're going to multiply your exponents together. So here's an example of the power rule. I have a base of 5 raised to an exponent of 3 raised to another exponent of 2. So I have an exponent inside and outside of the parentheses. I multiply those. So that's going to be 5 to the 6th power. And that's your answer right there. Okay, in my next example, it's still the power rule, but I got more than one thing going on inside the parentheses. I'm raising that entire quantity to the second power, so everything gets squared. The 3, the x to the 5th, and the y to the 7th. You could even consider that, like instead of writing squared there, you could write that quantity out twice and think about multiplying them like that. So don't forget, you got to take the 3 times the 3, the x fifth times the x to the fifth, and the y to the 7th times y to the 7th. Even if you don't want to write the quantity out twice, you can still distribute this exponent of 2 to everything. You just got to remember, you got to make it go to the 3, the x, and the y. So that's going to be 3 squared, x to the 10th, because I multiply those exponents, and y to the 14th. And we should really change 3 squared to be 9. And there's your final answer. I want to do a few more on the power rule, a few more examples for you. This one I threw in a negative number. That always messes people up. So I'm taking this quantity, negative 2x to the 6th power, and I'm cubing it. So I have to cube the negative 2 and the x to the 6th. So if I cube a negative 2, that's negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. So that's going to be negative 8x to the 18th. And that's your final answer. Okay, let's do one more of the power rules. So even if you see a fraction like this, and you're still taking this entire quantity, this fraction, and I'm cubing everything. So I'm going to cube the x cubed, and I'm going to cube the y to the 4th. So I'm still going to multiply my exponents, so it's going to be x to the 9th over y to the 12th. There's your final answer. Another property is the quotient rule. Whenever you're dividing things with the same base, you can subtract their exponents. So here's an example of that. I have x to the 5th divided by x cubed. They have the same base. The base is x on both of them. So all I have to do is subtract my exponents. So final answer, x squared. Okay, one more property of exponents for you, the zero exponent rule. Hopefully you know that anything raised to the zero power is 1. I have a few examples for you. This first one, notice that the entire quantity is raised to the zero power. That's supposed to be a y right there. Okay, so I have 135x squared y to the cube, but the whole thing is in parentheses. The entire quantity is being raised to the zero power. So since that entire thing is being raised to the zero power, your final answer is just 1. This next one's a little different. It's not in parentheses. So the only thing being raised to the zero power is this y. Everything else gets left alone. So the negative 25 stays, the x to the fifth stays. It's just y to the zero power turns into 1. So that's really just negative 25 x to the fifth. That's your final answer. This next one looks a lot like the first one that we did, where it was in parentheses and the whole thing is being raised to the zero power. Same thing here. So that entire thing, the negative and the 5, is both being raised to the zero power. So your answer is 1. Okay, this last example is kind of tricky. It gets a lot of people. It is not the same as the previous one. They're different. One of them has parentheses, one of them doesn't. And if you don't believe me, put them in your calculator exactly the way you see it. Put parentheses around this one and don't put parentheses around this one, and you'll get different answers. Okay, so this last one, there's no parentheses. So this negative is chilling out by itself. Leave it alone, don't touch it. That's really the opposite of whatever 5 to the 0 power is. So 5 to the 0 power is 1, but that negative is still out front, so your final answer is negative 1. Okay, I'm going to give you 4 practice problems. I want you to write them down, pause the video, see if you can figure them out, and we'll go over them in just a minute. Okay, you can check yourself. The first one, you're just multiplying, so notice you didn't have any exponents outside the parentheses. They were all on the inside. So we're going to multiply your coefficients first. So I just took 6 times 9 times 2 and got 108. And then for my z's, all I do is add up all the exponents. So 5 plus 3 plus 2 is 10. So my final answer, 108 z to the 10th. Number 2, this time you have an exponent on the inside of the parentheses and on the outside. It's a power to a power. So you multiply those. Final answer should be 5 to the 6th. Number 3, you're squaring everything, even the 3. So it should be 3 squared, x to the 4th squared, y to the 5th squared. So 3 squared is 9. And then when you have x to the 4th squared, you multiply those exponents. That's where I got x to the 8th. And then same thing for the y. I multiply my exponents. That's why I get y to the 10th. So my final answer, 9x to the 8th, y to the 10th. And number 4, I'm cubing everything inside there, the 2, the x, the y, and the z. So 2 cubed is going to be 8. That's where I got my 8. That's where most people mess up. And then x squared, if I cube that, I just have to multiply my exponents. So that's where I get x to the 6th. And then for my y, that's going to be y cubed and z to the 9th because you multiply your exponents. So final answer should be 8x to the 6th over y cubed z to the 9th. Okay, here's a few more for you to try. So pause the video, try these, see how you do. Okay, check yourself. The first one, number 5, that whole quantity is being raised to the 0 power, so it's just 1. Same thing with number 6, it's inside the parentheses, so I'm taking negative 4 is my base, I'm raising that entire thing to the 0 power, so it's 1. Number 7, there's no parentheses around that negative 4, so your base is only the 4. The negative is staying out front, so that's really the opposite of 4 to the 0 power. So the negative stays out front, and 4 to the 0 power is negative 1. And like I said, if you don't believe me, put them in your calculators exactly the way you see it. Number 6, you would put parentheses in your calculator exactly the way you see it. And number 7, you would not put parentheses around it. And your calculator will tell you. Number 8, the negative out front is going to stay out front. And then when I take this negative 4 to the 0 power, that becomes positive 1. But I still have the negative out front. So final answer, negative 1. And then last but not least, number 9, even if I have something really ugly inside there, it's still all in parentheses. The entire quantity is being raised to the 0 power. Final answer, 1. How'd you do? Okay. I'm actually going to stop the video here. I'm going to split R3 into 2 different videos because this one's getting pretty long. But write down any questions you have and bring them to class whenever we see you. Okay.